I am back with another sewing tutorial this week. Since everyone liked my knitting bag so much, I thought, why don't we make a DPN holder to match? Hello, welcome to Show and Tell Meg. I'm Megan, and I like to make things. I'm always knitting things, and now that I have my lovely sewing room set up and back in my possession, I also love to sew things. And so why not combine those two things and sew something for my knitting? Last week, we sewed this lovely project bag together. If you haven't seen that, I will link that above so you can see that full tutorial, all the information you need to make this absolutely awesome knitting bag. But as I was making this, I had the thought, I could make other knitting bag accessories to go with this same fabric, because I bought a full yard of this and I only needed a quarter of a yard and not even the whole thing of that to make this. So if you're being like me and you're using yardage, honestly, if you just had a full quarter yard all the way down the line, so not a fat quarter, but a quarter yard that is the full width of your fabric, you could make this and the knitting bag out of that, no problem. But either way, I have a list of supplies that you're going to need. So, just like the last time, we are going to need our outside fabric. I am using this same Rifle Paper Company Curio fabric with the books on it because I think it's adorable. This is a cotton canvas, but it can be anything really. It can be even quilting cotton. You just want to make sure that you have a good interfacing if you're doing a lighter weight fabric. We are also going to need a lining, and again, I'm using the exact same fabric that I lined this one with. This is an Essex linen, so this is a linen cotton blend. So it's a bit sturdy, similar to the canvas, but it's not impenetrable. So we're going to make up with that with our next ingredient, which is interfacing. This is Pellon 40 interfacing, which is a medium weight sew-in interfacing. Personally, I prefer a sew-in interfacing because I don't like the bubbles that you can get over time with the glue kind. Sometimes they don't glue initially. Sometimes they just separate if you wash them or something. And I'm not here for that. I would rather just sew in interfacing and use that as my stable layer. If you don't have interfacing though, keep in mind that you can use a heavyweight fabric in place of interfacing. So that's something to keep in mind, especially on a project that's this small. You can use scraps of other fabrics that you've used before, like, I don't know, denim or other things that are heavy duty. Because when you think about this, you don't want your needles to be able to easily pierce through. So that's the only thing to really keep in mind. And as long as you have something nice and sturdy, you don't even have to see it. If you're going to use an outer fabric and a lining, it's not even going to show. The other thing you're going to need are some snaps and then some kind of tool to put them on. I have this guy, which I'll be real, I've actually never used this before, so we're going to see how that goes. If this doesn't work, I have the traditional like snap setter tool you whack these on with. So I have used this type of snap before, but these are just lightweight plastic ones. I actually got these in the clearance section at Hobby Lobby, but you can find these all over the place. You can get them on eBay, Temu, Amazon, or your local fabric store if you happen to be lucky enough to have one. So that is all we're going to need other than coordinating thread. This is a very simple project. It is literally a rectangle. If you have sewn this, you will be able to sew this one. So we're going to need to cut our pieces. And in order to do that, you have to decide what length of DPNs you're going to do. So if you're new around here, DPNs stands for double pointed needles. And I do have a very handy case for my DPNs. But when they are in use on a sock, it just never fails that when I don't want them to slide out while they're in my bag, that's exactly what they do. It gets hung on the yarn or my pattern or whatever inside the bag. And I think I have it and I pull it out, and what do you know? A couple of stitches have slipped off. So this whole project is to prevent that from happening. I have used another store-bought product that prevents these from coming off, and it works well, but I think that this one is going to work better. And at the end of this, I will give you a side-by-side comparison to show you why I think that. So anyway, all I needed out of that bag was some DPNs. So I am partial to 6-inch DPNs when I am knitting socks. If you use longer DPNs, that's fine. You're just going to want to keep that in mind while you're measuring. So I'm going to make my holder 8 inches wide. And then just to give enough for seam allowance and overlap and everything like that, I'm going to make mine 5 inches deep. So we are just going to cut a rectangle. And since I've got my quilting ruler here, it makes it super easy. But you can use scissors, rotary cutter, all of that kind of thing. There's no rules. It is your choice. So once it's folded over, it's going to be about like this, just minus the seam allowance. And I only need one of these in the interfacing. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing with my fashion fabric. Now, since I have this piece already cut, I can lay this on top of my fashion fabric, and I can use this to fussy cut what I want visible on my little pouch. So in my case, there are books, and I would like to see the books, but I would also like to see them when it's folded flat. So I know it's not going to encompass them completely, and that's okay, but I am going to try to make this nice and straight with the edge of the books. So it's going to be cut right there. Second piece cut. I'm going to take all 3 of these pieces to the iron, press them nice and flat, just so that we don't have any puckers going on when we start. All right. This is so easy. It feels kind of like cheating to show it to you. But what we're going to do is we are going to line the outside fabric onto the interfacing so that it's totally straight. Okay, nice and straight. All the edges are aligned. And I am going to fold this down on itself with the right side of the fabric facing itself. We're going to fold that in half, and we are going to pin that in place. Don't be afraid to lay it down. Make sure that everything looks good on both sides, that it's nice and aligned. There's no ward if you don't use pins. If you don't want to use pins, that's fine. But as long as it gets the job done and it's nice and crisp, I don't really care. I use pins. Sometimes I use clips, whatever. Okay. We're going to do the same thing with the lining. Fold it on itself. In my case, my lining does not have a side, but you're going to put the right sides together if there is a front and a back. And we are going to pin that at the side. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to come in on the edge. I'm going to use 1/4 inch, maybe slightly over that seam allowance, and I'm just going to do only the edge here. And on the lining piece, I'm going to do one whole side, and then the other side, I'm only going to do the top half. I'm going to leave at least enough of an opening because this is where you're going to flip the whole thing right side out. So maybe not even half, actually. I'm just going to do, 3/4 of an inch and leave the rest of that open. So let's go sew that down. All right, so this is the one that I'm only going to go to this pin and then I'm going to stop. So now I'm going to take my scissors and I am going to cut the corner right close to my stitching. And that's going to be so that we can get a nice crisp corner on this. I'm going to do that to my outer piece as well. And then we are going to go to the ironing board and we're going to press these seams open so that it eliminates any kind of bulk that we could get right there. I'm using a point pressing tool for this, but honestly, you could just try to get it in there as close as you can with a sleeve board, anything like that. You can also, if you don't have that at your disposal, you can flip this to where you can just flip this inside like that and then put your iron tip all the way in there. I know that that's not showing you what I'm talking about, but all I did was get it like this and then put the iron right there, and it got it nicely pressed wide open. So on that side that we left open, I am just making sure that I have folded that seam allowance exactly the same, and I'm going to press it, which is going to majorly come in handy when I am stitching it closed later. You don't have to do that, but it does make it a bit easier. All right, we have all of our pieces. They are nice and pressed. And so we are going to take our lining piece. We're going to flip it right side out. And then we are going to take this and shove it inside the outer fabric. So we want to make sure that those seams are nicely aligned. Pinning it in place at the seam line first. I don't know if you can see that, but that's what I'm doing. I'm getting that seam line right on it on both sides. Pinning that in place. And then I'm going to go around and kind of finesse that lining to be just level with the fabric. I'm going to get it all lined up and straight, and then we're going to pin that. All right, so now that it is pinned, we've got everything sandwiched together nicely like a little taco. So I'm going to go to my sewing machine and I'm going to stitch all the way around that outer edge, and I'm going to do it at about 1/4 inch. Basically, you can just do it the width of the presser foot. There is no rule here as to how deep that seam allowance needs to be. Like, if you think about it, your knitting isn't going to be that deep. So it can even be a wider seam allowance if you feel more comfortable with a 1/2 inch. You can afford to lose that little bit. So do whatever you would like for the seam allowance, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, third, sewer's choice. And after we've stitched it, we're going to press that seam allowance towards the lining. Okay, I am first pressing just to set the stitches. And then to get everything nice and smooth, I'm going to pull this lining out like this. You can use your little hole there to get it popped out all the way. You're just kind of getting the lining out of the way, and then you're going to kind of tug on the lining as you press. And that will make all of the seam allowances want to go towards the lining. Okay, now that we have it all pressed, we're going to use that little hole right there that we left in the lining, and that's why we're going to flip this right side out. It's a little snug, but just stay with it and it will come through. I find that if it's really tight, it's helpful to kind of true that up, like open the hole a bit more before you pull more in. Okay, I've got it mostly flipped outside. We want those corners to be nice and pointy. So in true knitter fashion, I'm going to use a knitting needle. If you have a point turner, that will work just fine too. But I have just pushed that into the hole, and I am making it a nice crisp point because you're not going to be able to get to that after this point. And I'm doing that on the lining as well. Bring everything to a nice point except for this side because that's the side that we did not sew yet. So at the moment there is an inverted crease right here. I'm going to go back to the ironing board and I'm going to press this down in this position, trying not to do the lining piece. It can also be helpful to press your point turner right where the two fabrics meet at this joint right here. Mine was kind of wanting to dip in, and so that just helps. And then when I press it, it'll make it want to stay like that all the time. While I was pressing, I did kind of re-press this section with the seam allowances folded down. And now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to just go really, really close to the edge here. I can't entirely tell you a distance. You just want to get the needle as close to that edge as you can, and then it won't be as visible. This is going to be tucked inside anyway, so you're really not going to notice it like you'd think. All right, I have sewn that down. It's very, very close to the edge there. And then we're going to take this, pull it apart, and stuff that lining down in there. And because we've taken all that time of pressing this at all these different steps, it's gonna sit pretty close to how you want it to. The lining still does kind of want to pop out. So I'm going to go give this another press. I'm going to lay the iron inside here and I'm going to roll this down so that just a little bit of the outside fabric is visible on the inside, and that'll prevent the lining from popping out here. There's no sins that pressing can't mask because it looks wonderfully crisp. I really love how this looks. You can go along the edge here and top stitch. I think I'm going to leave mine just like it is. So the next step, we're going to need an awl. I have my handy little stiletto tool here, but you can use an actual awl, anything like that, just something sharp and pointy. So we're going to need to pull out the pieces of the snaps that we need. So now we're going to want to mark this evenly. But we also want it to come in far enough that it's going to hold the DPNs in place. So when I put that there, I've got it centered. And if I place my presser studs about 1.5 inches in from the edge, that should be good. And then I want to give the knitting enough room at the top here because as my sock gets thicker, it is going to need a little more space. So I'm going to come 3/4 of an inch up. So I'm going to go 1.5 inches in and 3/4 of an inch from the edge. And I'm going to do that on both sides. To do that, I'm going to use my grid ruler, but you can use a regular ruler, make a little dot for where you want to do this. To do that, I'm going to use my grid ruler, but you can use a regular ruler, make a little dot for where you want to do this. I'm just going to lay this on there like I want it to be. 1.5 and 3/4. And I'm going to put my awl in there, and I'm going to poke this all the way through both layers of fabric. So that way I know that these pressers are going to line up correctly. So I'm going to take, so that way I know that these pressers are going to line up. Okay, plan B. It appears that I don't have the tool that sets these plastic ones. I could have sworn that I did, but out of all these different setter tools, not a single one works. But what I do know that I can use are standard metal snaps. I do have some very fancy old school pearl snaps. So that is what I'm going to do because it looks nice. I have used this guy, the Dritz one, and I've used this one so much that all the plastic is like busted. So we're not going to use that. We're going to use the snap setter. But if you have the Dritz one, it works perfectly fine, just so you know. To do this, I'm going to need the outside one. We want to put that in the fabric where it needs to go. And I'm just going to do it right around that hole that I made. But we are going to push those teeth through just so that I know it is well seated. I'm going to take the next layer, place that around it, which will keep everything nice and straight. And then I'm going to take the nipple end, put that on there. And then we're going to line this baby up. We're going to give it a whack. And that one went on just fine. So I'm going to use that same hole that I made as the alignment spot for the other end. So now that one has pearl snaps on both sides. So nice and fancy. Now I'm going to do the other end the exact same way. And now for the true test, I'm going to take my active sock knitting project. I'm going to tuck, whoop, I'm going to open it up, tuck all my needles up in there, and then snap it down. And it works. So now my sock project is perfectly protected. Unless I pop those snaps out, it's not going anywhere. And I'm really happy about that. So let me clean a little bit of this up and I will show you what I was using before this. As promised, now that we're finished, I'm going to give you a little comparison of what I had used before. For a very long time, I used nothing. I just put my knitting project into the bag with a hope and a prayer that it wouldn't fall off of the needles. And depending on the yarn, like softer yarns is definitely more prone to do this. And also, since I use metal needles most of the time, it was just bound to happen. I have had better luck with the carbons needles, but even my bamboo needles that I used before these, they used to slide off all the time. There was really kind of nothing I could do about it. So I've been intending to make one of these for a very long time. But in the meantime, Knitpicks had a sale on their notions and tools, and I did find this thing on Black Friday where they had it half price, and it's this kind of nifty tube. It comes apart in two pieces, and it has this groove cut into it on one side. And so the way that this works is one of the tubes is smaller than the other, so you want to slide your knitting into the smaller tube. And the only kind of annoying bit is you've really got to coax it if you are doing certain areas of the sock that are thicker. Like if I'm in the middle of doing a heel, it is very hard to slide this thing on. But so you slide it in this side, and then you take the bigger receiving side and you slide that on too. And this works great too. Like I say though, if you are on a thick section, so at the moment I'm just on the leg, I'm starting the heel. If I had the heel flap and I was in the process of doing my gusset decreases, it gets really bulky right in this area. And as you can see, I mean, I've kind of frayed back the edges of this tube because this is just cardboard. This is like a toilet paper tube or a paper towel tube, something like that, just with an enclosed end. And I mean, it's well made, it's sturdy cardboard, but it is still cardboard. And so every time I'm shoving that through, it is rubbing the edges of that down a bit. And so that does feel like this has a limited shelf life. Also, if you were to step on this or something, like if your bag got set on the ground or if you sat on your bag, you could totally crunch this. Some people in the reviews complained about that they didn't realize that it was something that was so easily broken or compressed, you know? So it works great, I have to say, and it wasn't very expensive. I got it, like I say, half price, and I think it was like $4.50. So regular, it's like $8 or $9, and it's definitely worth it if you don't want to sew or if you're not able to sew. But I have to say, being able to just stick it in there and click this down, and now it's nice and protected. And if I was, heaven forbid, to sit on it or anything like that, I don't think it would hurt my project. I might break my needles, but I mean, these are stainless steel Chow-Goos, so good luck with that. I could bend them, I guess, but overall, I think that this one is just going to be a lot handier for those bulkier sections of the sock in particular. For the true joy of making your own items, I have my knitting bag. I'm going to plunk my yarn in there and my covered up needled sock project, and I'm going to stick it in my bag, and I am good to go. And I know that everything inside is going to be nice and protected no matter how much this gets bumped around. So I am very excited to not have any dropped stitches when I open this sock project up. Well, that is all that I have for you today. I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope that you found this tutorial useful. If you liked this, please do give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to stick around and see more. I have more plans to make yet another knitting accessory that will match this bag. So if you are all about sewing the knitting accessories, then I hope that you will stick around and see that when it gets posted soon. If you do use this tutorial, I would absolutely love to see a picture of the things that you make with it. I do include my email on every single video. If you go to the description and scroll down, you can email me a photo, and I would love to see all of the DPN holders that you make. But until next time, I am fully ready for some on-the-go sock knitting, and I hope now that you are too.